Take 2,000 CEOs of 48 nationalities working in businesses in 33 countries, and what do you get? Well, you get a list of the best performing CEOs in the world, 200 of them. And the list was compiled by 3 INSEAD professors. One of them is here with us today. Thank you very much, Urs Peyers, for being with us. We appreciate it. You are the Associate Professor of Finance here. And who else wrote the list with you? It was Herminia Ibarra and Morten Hansen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Why was it important to do this kind of ranking?
The initial sort of idea about doing a ranking wasn't really getting the ranking done and getting it to have the publicity it reached, but it was really the idea of trying to understand what kind of strategies, what kind of leadership styles do make someone successful in leading an organization to top performance. And therefore we need to know who are the top performers, and that's sort of how we got started and started to look at this from an international perspective. Given our focus on global business, we wanted to go beyond what usual business schools in the US have done and focus on a global list of top performing CEOs.
So what kind of questions, what kind of criteria and questions did you use in order to figure out who is the best performing? How do you ask a question that elicits that?
Right. So what we started off with was a list of, think about the S&P 1200 global list. That is a list of I'd say the largest 1,200 firms in the world, plus 40 companies from sort of a list that's called BRIC 40. That gives you the 33 different countries that we had companies from. And we looked over a period of roughly 15 years, so since 1995 to now 2009. And we were starting with these large firms, and we're trying to see which of those large firms indeed, when they have a CEO from the beginning to the end of his tenure, what is the performance that the CEO has achieved. So basically it is an analysis of an entire career of a CEO with a firm. And again, the notion would be that we want to see really the performance of a CEO during its entire tenure to understand who does well, what kind of strategies work well, what kind of leadership styles should we even investigate, who are these people that have delivered performance. This is a bit in contrast to many rankings that we see on CEOs, which are short-term, 1 year, best CEO, most recognized CEOs, and all of these lists that look at very short-term.
Yeah, that's more like a popularity contest, it seems like. This is a little more profound than that. Quite
exactly.
And GE isn't on the list.
GE did not make it. Jack Welch was sort of started to be CEO before 95, so he did not make our list. And Jeff Immelt, as a successor, has not
been there long enough.
Has not performed as well as the other guys that compete with him for these top spots.
But Steve Jobs, the head of Apple, is #1.
Yes.
Sort of the poster child, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a good person to have as a #1 person. Which was the outcome of our selection or of our ranking or criteria, which are based on stock value. Think of how many dollars of stock market capitalization did Steve Jobs add during his tenure, and until end of September 2009, when we stopped measuring, was about $150 billion during his tenure. So he created that together with his whole team naturally, but as a leader, he has certainly had his contribution to it. And made this is also, in other ways of expresses, about 3,200% stock return, which is an amazing
That's not
number.
Bad. Right. I went through the list, and of course when you start doing that you can really lose yourself in the mathematics involved here. So of the top 5, it's kind of international. You have Steve Jobs, US, then you have the head of Samsung, #2, the head of Gazprom, #3. I would have thought corporate governance might have gotten in the way of that company, but John Chambers, Cisco, #4, and the head of Reliance, India, as #5. That's quite a mixture. Right. What does that tell us about?
So we were indeed surprised to find such a variety of countries or nationalities being in the top 50 or top 200 of our list. It does seem that a CEO can make a difference independent of what country he or she is working in. And that was a good thing for us to know that indeed this is a global game these days, that CEOs can perform extremely well. Again, using the measure of creating shareholder value, that indeed can be done anywhere in the world.
What happens when some of these people leave?
Yeah, so we've had the opportunity, given our data set, to look a little bit at what happens when you succeed a stellar CEO who has made it to the very top in our ranking, right? And then such a stellar CEO has left, and then you look at the tenure of the next person, the next CEO, and we were very surprised to find that there's almost no one that follows a superstar that can make it again to a superstar status. But it's also true on the downside, following a CEO who was not very successful in his job, it seems to be much easier to get to the very top of the ranking. You can mention Steve Jobs, who has again taken over in '97 from his predecessor that then did not perform very well. And so you see this kind of it depends who is in charge. So we would argue a little bit in the direction that the CEO actually matters. If it was simply the firm and it's all its other employees and its assets, you should see that a stellar performer is followed by another stellar performer, because really the CEO makes very little difference and the rest of the firm stays in place and delivers. And we don't find that, so we think it is worthwhile studying further what makes CEOs really different.
Well, there are hardly any women here. I mean, in the 200, there's one, Meg Whitman from eBay.
Yep.
How many of the 2,000 were women under consideration?
I would say this was a bit of a surprise to us. We only found 29 female CEOs.
Did you look hard enough?
Yes, indeed. The funny thing was, indeed, at the beginning we had 20, and then we found out we we had 30, and then we misclassified one guy as a lady. So we had to correct that eventually. So we now ended up with 29, and indeed, Meg Whitman, as number 8 on the ranking, did extremely well. We think that it is very hard for females to make it to the very top, because you can see that the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th female CEO on our list, they have much shorter tenures, and they're all still in the job, meaning we have not seen their full tenure performance.
How do you think people will use this list? It's getting it's kind of sexy. It is getting a lot of publicity, but how do you think people might use it?
Well, in the end, I think there's two users of it. It's the ones who would really want to show that the people who've added value, that they might not be the ones who are usually known or well publicized. And there's the academic side of it, which we were trying to push a bit more and trying to say, okay, I think we should use a different metric for what a CEO performance is, looking at its entire tenure. And then such a ranking would help us to sort of look further into who should we analyze, and certainly one of the future things we're going to look at is compensation, and trying to understand better whether these successful CEOs are the CEOs who make a lot of money because they've created a lot of value for their shareholders, and just to understand a bit better the correlations between compensation and performance, and that will certainly lead to some surprises. As we know now, the banking industry has a bit go down the drain.
It's going to be interesting in the future, see what happens.
Exactly, and some of those have made a lot of money in the process, but given the sort of recent crashes, have certainly not created a lot of shareholder value.
Not in the long term, anyway.
Not in the long term.
Let me end by asking you what changes you think you might be making for the next one.
In terms of the metric, I think we're still very convinced that this is the right way of measuring the value created. I think it's more the hope that there's going to be more diversity, females making up a bigger part of it. From the methodology, I think we're happy with what we have, and we're just going to be interested in seeing what these CEOs are going to do now during the crisis and post-crisis, who can sort of get out of these difficult economic times best.
I can't wait to see what it's going to be like. Thank you very much, Urs Peyers, for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you for having me.